Alright guys, so making a return to the YouTube game with nothing other than a quad session. And this is really one of the more thought out quad sessions and one of the more complete quad sessions that I've had recently. And has been very similar to my overall style of programming across the board with all muscle groups. So I figured I'd start it out with legs, a strong point for me, to give you guys a little bit of the insight that I use when training my legs and some of the principles that I hold most near and dear to my heart when training legs, because I feel that they're even more important on a leg day. Not that they're not important with any other muscle group, but with legs, certain principles apply to even greater extent. So beginning, my first exercise was a safety bar squat on heel elevation. I used a 20-degree heel elevation and using the solo wedges. As you may have seen in previous videos, when I've squatted on heel elevation, I had a single ramp. So with that, I had a wood ramp of my own that was a single ramp. So I simply just cut it in half. So as you've seen with Prime Fitness coming out with individual squat wedges, and the advantages of that being able to not only allow your knee to track farther over your toe to bias the quad, as with any heel elevation or squat ramp, but with these, allowing yourself to angle those ramps out a little bit and be able to match the natural rotation of your hips, which can vary from person to person. So that will allow you to be able to clear yourself at the hip joint as well as the knee joint. So that will allow for a little bit of additional depth. And the first time I used it, I noticed that there was a little more depth even compared to using the traditional single wedge. So I started with those heel elevated safety bar squats. Brown's Gym has a safety bar, which I do like, and I will keep in my programming. I do also rotate between just a traditional heel elevated back squat and the safety bar squat. The only difference is that the safety bar squat may have a little bit more distance of that knee over the toe, so a little bit more quad emphasis. But if I'm just looking for an overall squat motion to begin my workout, either one is a great choice. I worked up to a top set of, it came out to be 4 reps in this session. My usual top set of squats tends to be anywhere within the 4 to 6 rep range. And then I followed it up with 2 back off sets. First back off set usually is about 6 to 8 reps, and then about 8 to 10 reps from there. As I mentioned later in the video, with bigger movements that involve a lot of muscles and a lot of stabilizing muscles particularly, I like to err a little bit on the lower rep range, simply because the sets will take less time. So that will allow myself to try to get that working muscle to be the first thing to fail, rather than any kind of supporting musculature. So with squats, if you notice that once you get into higher rep ranges, you're not able to control your core as well, not able to keep your upper back tight, your feet planted, or your head or neck still, or anything like that. Maybe try dipping down a little bit into those lower rep ranges, and then save some of the higher rep work for something that's a more brace or stable environment, which I get to in this workout after transitioning from the safety bar squat, then moving into a reverse band hack squat. Placing this second in the workout, great strength, great resistance profile coming from this one, matching what we could produce using the reverse band to allow us to get a little bit of assistance out of the bottom. So matching with the longest moment arm at the bottom with the shortest moment arm at the top, allowing that load to be pretty similar based on the accommodating resistance from the band. I only ended up doing 2 sets of those, top set of about 6 reps, and then the second set of about 8 to 10. And you'll see I jump a little bit more substantially in weight in between those sets, and that's another thing I tend to do when only using 2 working sets. You have to jump a little bit more down in weight each set to hit those rep ranges, because I do still like to keep anywhere between that 6 and 10 rep range, and to accomplish that in 2 sets, the weight drop off has to be a little more significant than if you try to accomplish that in 3 sets. Then moving on to a banded leg press, this one banded from the bottom, so increasing the tension as you get to the top. As you know, you get to the top of a leg press, you stack out the joint, then you pretty much have 0 tension. So the band will help to alleviate that to an extent. Using a heavy blue band, you're not really able to get enough band tension. If you'd have to use multiple heavy bands to try to replicate the amount of load that you get from the plates at the bottom in band tension at the top. So not really realistic, but still getting a little bit at the top, which is pretty much impossible to produce without using some sort of accommodating resistance. I did 2 heavy sets of about 8 to 10 reps, and then usually with leg press, if I'm doing 2 or 3 sets, I like to finish with some sort of intensifier. Usually it's a triple drop set or a strip set, something along those lines. But training alone in this session, I wasn't really looking to be able to get up every set after the leg press, strip plates from each side. I wouldn't even be able to get back down to perform my reps really in time within that 15-20 second window that you usually use with a drop set. So instead I just did a substantial drop off and did 2 sets of about 25 reps. So getting a little bit more of that metabolic and lactic work in with the higher rep sets. 2 heavy sets, 2 light sets, and then finishing up quads with leg extensions, keeping myself very braced, allowing whatever kind of output I still have left after those 3 primary quad and more pressing style movements, whether it is your squats or your leg press, just looking for output from those, and then moving into leg extensions to really put the icing on the cake with that. Did 2 sets of leg extensions, first set aiming for 8 to 10 reps, and then second set aiming for 10 to 12. If you get a few more, no biggie. I do like to err a little bit on the higher rep side with leg extensions, depending on where I put them in my programming, especially at the end of a quad session. So doing those and then finishing up the 3rd set of leg extensions with a NOS or a triple drop set. And that was it for quads. I also trained hamstrings that day, but didn't get a chance to record it. So I just wanted to present the quad session or the quad portion of the session to allow you guys to get a little bit deeper into my thought process on exactly how I program things. And then as you see the exercises and the sets themselves, what I'm thinking about in the gym, in the moment, to allow myself to be able to get the most out of these sets with the proper plan laid out in place. So I hope you guys enjoy this quad workout, and as you'll see, take some notes of these exercise cues. It really helps me if you're able to get those to work outside of the gym. Once you're able to get into the gym, your nervous system will be able to subconsciously process all of those cues that you can use in your session, which will lend to a much more productive session. Once again, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this quad work.
Starting out quads with a heel elevated safety bar squat. So after my warm-up sets, which I did not show, this is my top set using 390 pounds for 4 reps. So with this, you'll see the advantages of using the heel wedge and the safety bar is that I'm able to initiate the movement by driving my knees forward, allowing that knee to track as far forward as I can to allow myself to bias the quad more so than the glutes in your squat. The squat can be biased based on that, whether you are hip dominant or knee dominant, as people like to describe it in the squat motion. So after my top set of 4 reps, began my back off sets. This is my first back off set. With my squats, I usually like to keep a little bit heavier and in the lower rep ranges, because as I notice, once I get to the higher reps, it's usually more of form failure rather than muscular failure. So with a squat, a lot of moving parts in the motion, I like to keep the reps a little bit lower, thus the sets being a little bit shorter, to allow myself and my core, my upper back, and everything to stay tight and just allow that failure to be mostly on my quads. Second back off set, this one aiming for about 8 or 9 reps, usually my top set about 4 to 6, then about 6 to 8, and then usually between about 8 and 10 on my second back off set. This is the second back off set. Same form principles apply, just with a little bit lighter load, trying to really improve my depth, so as I go into next week's heavy sets, have that depth be there with a heavier weight and allow my nervous system to be able to react once I get into that position and keep my execution consistent. So did 3 sets of the safety bar squats to start, and then after that, moving into a reverse band hack squat, then followed by a leg press and leg extension. So with the squats, sometimes I will do my leg extensions before, sometimes I will squat first. That all really depends on what my knees have been like. So in this particular session, my knees felt really good to go. And after my warm-up sets, I was able to dive right into working sets of squats. So with the reverse band hacks, after my squat motion, my free weight squat motion, I look for an option that's a little bit more braced. So that's the main advantage of the hack squat, allowing yourself to push your entire back into the pad, your shoulders into the pad, and allow your quads to, or yourself to really focus on pushing through your quads in a very braced environment. As for using the reverse band, just to improve the profile, bias the length and range a little bit with my squats, now trying to even out that profile with a reverse band, working up to 6 plates as you've seen here. Had 2 great spotters there to grind out some forced reps, got me to 6, and then after that backed off for only 1 back off set, this one with 4 plates and a 25. Usually, depending on if I do 2 or 3 sets, my back offs will be a little bit more significant if doing 2 sets. So as you saw, I used 6 plates and then drop it to 4 and a 25. If I was doing 3 sets, most likely I would have dropped from 6, dropped to 5, dropped to 4, to have a little less variation between the rep ranges, but with only 2, I like to keep my rep ranges a little varied, so more of a drop-off must be done. And with this motion, this is a very good squat motion for beginners. The advantage, like I mentioned earlier, not as many moving parts as something like a safety bar squat. Does it make one particularly better than the other? No, but I do tend to keep hacks in my program almost regardless if I have the availability of the machine. Then moving on to leg press, again using some accommodating resistance with a heavy blue band. So instead of reverse band, I am banding this from the bottom. So as you can see, I contract up and then have to contract through that band tension. Don't know exactly how much it is. The blue bands usually at full stretch can be between 150 and 250 pounds, I believe. So using a thick band, because as you see I had 9 plates on, so I really wanted to get enough band tension at the top because I had enough weight or load from the plates at the bottom of the rep. I wanted to really keep that profile as even as possible. Programming with this one, I did 2 heavy sets with 9 plates of about 8 to 10. This is the second working set. And then since I was alone, instead of worrying about stripping plates from each side and trying to perform a drop set, I did my 2 heavy sets and then backed off and did 2 very high rep sets as a little bit more of a metabolic output type work at the end of the leg press. So as I had 9 here, I went down, I believe it was to 4 plates, kept the band on, and then my rep range went from 8 to 10 to about 25 reps each set. And with this, again, all things remain constant with the execution, keeping your hips locked down and back into the pad. Same thing applies with the hack squat. So as you see, range of motion may not seem like it's the largest, but the key is if I went any lower than that, I would simply rotate my pelvis and thus taking the tension off of my quads, which is what you don't want to do, and also putting your lower back in a bad position as well. So you really want to keep mind of that, especially on your leg presses, your hack squats, anything where you do have that bit of artificial stability. Your pelvis wants to tilt a little bit at the bottom if you try to overstretch the rep, but we don't want to do that, and just keep the tension mostly on the quads, especially with this higher rep set, trying to minimize that pause at the top, but at the same time with a band on there, a pause at the top won't be as detrimental if there were no band, so you will still have a degree of tension because the band is at full stretch, rather than if you were doing a leg press with just plate weight. You would pretty much have your joints stacked at the top and then have 0 tension there. And that's what you'll see a lot of people do when they load up a leg press. with a weight that they'll hit a couple reps, pause at the top. So essentially they're doing a rest pause set for the longest time. Like I said, 2 sets of about 25 reps with the leg press. And with the exercise order, something I really wanted to talk about. What I've been doing recently is with a lot of my movements, I've been starting with pretty much the least stable exercise of any exercises that I have in my program. So in this case, you saw me start with safety bars and then move to hacks and leg press, which are more stable output-based type exercises for quads. And I've pretty much done that across the board as well. That is one of the factors I look for when programming. Another thing that I also look for across my exercises overall is the resistance profile and what that has to do with where I'm programming the exercise in my workout and where I'm going to fatigue based on exercises prior. So with the squat, least stable to start, working to a hack, and then to leg press, still trying to keep an even profile. Not that I'm going to have a substantial amount of band tension at the top here that's more than that length and range at the bottom with the plates, so you don't have to worry about the profile being uneven. Final exercise for quads is leg extensions, keeping myself locked down and back here. I don't know if you can see it, but I do have a band that's acting as sort of a seat belt, and that keeps my hips anchored down in place as I contract my quads up. 2 sets here, second set being a NOS or triple drop set, aiming anywhere between 8 and 12 reps. And that is pretty much it for the quad workout. So as I mentioned, one of the more thought out quad workouts, which encapsulates a lot of the main movements I like to keep in my program almost year round, a squat variation with heel elevation, a hack squat, a leg press, both with accommodating resistance and leg extensions to cap it off.